Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're embarking on a really unique journey. We're going through a world shattered and, well, in many ways, rebuilt.
Yeah, and this isn't just going to be your typical lore summary, right? No dry dates and events.
Exactly. This is a deep dive into the actual lived experience of the Fallout universe and our guide. It's this compelling narrative from Lóng Tíng.
Right, a human voice, someone supposedly shaped by the wastes they actually, traverse.
Yeah, someone who walked the walk. So our mission today is to kind of pull out these profound insights, these universal human truths from the ashes of this fallen world,
Yeah.
all seen through the eyes of a true wanderer.
And what's really fascinating here, I think, is the source material itself. It's not just facts, not just geopolitical shifts.
And it's more personal.
Way more. It's about the feeling of survival.
Yeah.
The incredible weight of choice when literally every decision could be life or death. And the human spirit just enduring, sometimes in really surprising ways, even when faced with just absolute desolation.
It really makes you ask that question, doesn't it?
It does. What does it actually mean to rebuild? Not just buildings, but societies, hope, maybe even souls, when everything you knew is just gone, turned to ash.
It's a powerful way to look at this whole saga.
Definitely. A unique lens.
So to really set the stage, to kind of get the feel of the dust and hear those whispers from the past, let's hear directly from Lóng Tíng. The voice itself, as you'll hear, it's described as fragile, human, almost poetic. It carries the weight of every mile walked, every lesson learned the hard way. Let's listen.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
I am Lóng Tíng. I have walked the bones of America through dust storms that tasted of grief and the husks of dead cities where ghosts still whisper. I have journeyed through vaults that promised salvation and, in their cold embrace, gave only sorrow.
Wow. Heavy stuff.
Right. I have listened to the wind carry voices of the lost, the echoes of those who came before, those who fought and fell, and those who dared to dream again. And in my own way, I've tried to answer their call to learn from their triumphs and their failures.
A sense of immense history there.
Definitely. Tonight, I tell you a story. It is not merely of bombs and war, for those are but the opening chords of a much longer, more complex symphony. This is a story of what remained when the fire died and what we, the survivors, chose to do with it.
Okay, so it's about the aftermath, the choices.
Exactly. Sit with me by this broken campfire. Let the waste speak through me. Let the ash tell its tale.
That's quite the intro. Sets a specific mood.
It really does. So Lóng Tíng starts by taking us back, not straight to the bombs, but to the slow burn before them, to that world that was, unknowingly digging its own graves, speeding towards disaster. So what was it like? Before the sky burned, what led up to the Great War?
Well, the chronicles Lóng Tíng draws on, they paint a pretty grim picture of the 21st century. It's described really starkly as an age of greed disguised as progress.
Oh, that hits hard.
Yeah. And this wasn't some sudden bolt from the blue. It was a long decline, decades long. The world was just slowly being eaten away by these escalating resource wars.
Resource wars?
Yeah.
Mainly oil,
Yeah,
right?
primarily, yeah. Driven by this catastrophic global oil shortage that really started hitting hard in the 2050s. I mean, just imagine a world where the last drops of oil become more valuable than lives.
Nations bleeding each other dry for energy.
Exactly. It set this chilling stage for just unprecedented global conflict. It wasn't a single flashpoint. It was this long, agonizing death by 1,000 cuts. A slow burn, like you said.
And these weren't just, abstract economic things or diplomatic notes being passed back and forth. The sources give specific, brutal examples of this desperation turning violent.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just tensions simmering under the surface. It blew up into really concrete, devastating actions. You see clear examples like the U.S. making these extreme, you could definitely argue, imperialistic moves by annexing Canada.
Annexing Canada.
Yeah.
Wow. Not exactly friendly neighbors.
Not at all. It was a forceful takeover, purely driven by the desperate need to secure Canadian resources, fueling their own, insatiable consumption. And then on the other side of the globe, in 2066, China, facing its own crippling energy crisis, makes a direct military move, invades Alaska.
Alaska. For the oil, obviously.
Exactly. Their goal was just as pragmatic and brutal, grab the last big oil reserves left on the planet. So the world was fracturing along these resource lines. The battlefields were becoming pretty clear.
And the U.S. didn't just roll over in Alaska, did they? Operation Anchorage. That name comes up a lot in the pre-war stuff.
Right. Operation Anchorage, that was 2076. A massive military campaign where the U.S. did manage to push the Chinese forces out of Alaska, successfully repelled them.
A big victory hailed back home, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. Heralded as decisive, proof of American might. But, and this is crucial, it came at an immense cost. Lives, resources, and it just hammered home the brutal reality of these global resource wars. The sources make it really clear the world was slowly burning, consumed by its own hunger and infighting, long before any bombs actually fell.
So this whole period of tension, resource depletion, aggression, it was the grim prelude.
The inevitable culmination, really, not an accident, just the result of decades of human folly.
And then the slow burn hits flashpoint. Suddenly everything changes. The Great War. Just 2 hours, they say, redefined everything. Tell us about that cataclysm.
October 23rd, 2077, that's the date. All the conflict, the greed, the desperation, it just boiled over into what we now call the Great War. And the destruction, I mean, it's almost impossible to comprehend.
2 hours.
Long Ting's chronicles put it so simply, 2 hours, that's all it took. In that terrifyingly short window, nuclear bombs rained down everywhere, just obliterated the old world.
City's gone.
Turned to dust instantly. Rivers, lifelines for populations, boiled away, vaporized. Civilization, as it had existed for thousands of years, just stopped, ended, buried itself under the very ground it poisoned. The planet scarred beyond recognition, a lasting echo of humanity's ultimate self-destruction.
And Lóng Tíng, even though they weren't there for those specific 2 hours,
Yeah.
they feel that weight. It's like this constant hum underneath everything in their journey.
Exactly. They reflect on it saying, I wasn't there, not in the way history remembers. My eyes did not witness the flash, my ears did not hear the thunder, but I have walked the ashes that remained for what felt like endless years.
It can feel the exhaustion in that.
Totally. I've seen the skeletons of cities reaching towards a sky that betrayed them, the ghosts of a world that in its hubris killed itself. And with every step through the desolation, I have asked again and again, with a voice that sometimes trembled, what do we do with what's left? What can be salvaged from such utter ruin?
That question, what do we do with what's left? It hangs over everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it leads us right into the immediate aftermath, the first really tentative steps towards rebuilding. So what happened when those first vaults finally cracked open? When people started stepping back out, this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because it wasn't stepping out into some gentle meadow.
Not even close. You're absolutely right. The first big kind of organized step towards what they called reclamation happened when Vault 76 opened. That was on Reclamation Day, 2102.
Only 25 years after the bombs. That seems fast.
Surprisingly fast, yeah. Especially considering the state of the world. And Vault 76 wasn't just a shelter. It had a specific mission brief. Lóng Tíng notes. It was basically a promise that we would rebuild.
So the people coming out of 76 were like the pioneers, tasked with restarting everything.
Pretty much. The vanguard of a new civilization sent out to reclaim Appalachia, which was an incredibly audacious goal, given how fresh the scars still were.
And Appalachia itself.
Yeah.
Even 25 years later.
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly welcoming, was it? How did Lóng Tíng describe that area?
Their description is really striking. A mix of awe and, well, dread. They called it raw, jagged, almost alive in its fury.
Alive in its fury.
Yeah, a place that, even ruined, had this wild, untamed energy. You got to picture a landscape where radiation twisted ancient trees into these grotesque alien shapes, rivers shimmering with this unnatural, poisonous glow, buildings half swallowed by aggressive, mutated plants.
So not exactly a blank slate for building a new world.
Definitely not. More like a deeply scarred, dangerous world, beautiful in its own ruinous way maybe, but brimming with untamed, paradoxical danger. The land itself was still a living adversary.
So the Vault 76 dwellers coming out with this grand mission to rebuild, they immediately hit massive challenges, not just planting crops.
Oh, far from it. The challenges in early Appalachia were existential. They weren't just fighting the environment, they were fighting totally new forms of mutated life, new threats. Lóng Tíng talks about fighting the scorched, the feral, the things that should not have lived.
The scorch, they were particularly bad, right? Like a plague.
Exactly. A unique, horrifying plague. A mutated virus that turned people into these aggressive crystalline husks. They threatened to basically wipe out any chance of organized rebuilding before it even started.
Jeez. So survival was the first hurdle, way before rebuilding.
Absolutely. But despite those dangers, the initial survivors, including Lóng Tíng apparently, they made these sincere, often desperate attempts, trying to help settlements get started, trying to bring back some small light to the darkness. It was brutal, hard work, marked by courage, but also a lot of tragic loss.
But even with all that effort, Lóng Tíng came away with this really clear, hard-won lesson about how difficult it actually is, more than just surviving the bombs.
Yes. Their time in Appalachia led to this crucial, almost heartbreaking realization, they said. Appalachia taught me that rebuilding is harder than surviving.
That hits deep. Rebuilding is harder than surviving.
It's incredibly powerful, isn't it? It captures the huge, grinding, generational effort needed to not just live through the catastrophe, but to actually build something meaningful, something stable, something sustainable afterwards. Surviving the blast is one thing. Forging a civilization from rubble, that's a whole different, much harder game.
A testament to the scale of the task.
Totally. And you see that sentiment echoed, maybe with a bit of weary hope, in the Vault 76 Overseer's log. The final entry says something like, "Hope is stronger than fear. If they fail, it won't be because they didn't try. May they build something better than we ever could."
So even the planners knew it was a long shot.
They understood the overwhelming nature of what they were asking these people to do. It wasn't a guaranteed success by any means.
Okay, so from those first painful steps in Appalachia, Lóng Tíng's narrative then shifts focus, moves west to the West Coast, and talks about legends, these iconic figures who really laid the groundwork, made choices that echoed for generations. Tell us about them. The Vault Dweller, the Chosen One, foundational figures.
Yeah, these are the big ones. Almost mythical, their impact was so huge. So Fallout 1, set in Southern California, 2161, that introduces the Vault Dweller.
From Vault 13.
From Vault 13, and they didn't leave as some hardened warrior or leader. They left with one simple, desperate mission: find a water chip. Their home vault was dying.
It's trying to save their people. A simple quest initially.
Exactly. A MacGuffin hunt, basically. But like Lóng Tíng observed, the wasteland changes you, forces you to become something more.
And that journey led them straight into conflict with the Master.
Yeah.
Who wasn't just some monster, right? He had an ideology, a terrifying one.
Precisely. The Vault Dweller runs into the Master, this grotesque, mutated entity, and his army of super mutants. And the Master wasn't about simple conquest. He had this radical, horrific vision: unity through mutation.
Unity through mutation, forced unity.
Right. Forcing everyone into this new, supposedly perfect species, believing it would end humanity's flaws. A twisted kind of evolution, imposed through horrific means.
So the Vault Dweller had this huge choice: purity through forced unity, or what?
Or stand for something else. Ultimately, the Vault Dweller chose freedom with all its chaos, rejected the Master's sterile, monstrous order, chose messy, difficult liberty instead. And that decision, it resonated through the whole nascent wasteland, proved that individual choice, even in total ruin, could change the world.
And the Vault Dweller's own reflections on that, they're pretty powerful based on the sources.
Oh yeah, their last entry is incredible. "I saw what power does to men, to mutants, to nations. I turned away from the temptations of the Master's unity because freedom, even in ruin, is worth more than peace built on chains."
A deep understanding of power's corruption, even power wielded for what seems like a greater good.
Exactly. Hard-won wisdom. And the irony, the official Vault 13 mission summary, found later, just dismisses this monumental choice with bureaucratic coldness. Subject exiled for dangerous ideas.
Dangerous ideas like freedom. Wow. Official history versus actual impact.
A classic example. It shows how easily true heroism can be misinterpreted or just plain ignored by the powers that be.
And then years later, that legacy, that fight for freedom, it continued with the Chosen One.
Right. Fallout 2, Northern California, 2241. We meet the Chosen One, a direct descendant of the Vault Dweller. And their burden is just as heavy. They're seeking the GEC.
The Garden of Eden creation kit. To save their home, Arroyo.
Exactly. Not a water chip this time, but this pre-war terraforming device, a miracle machine that could turn wasteland green, humanity's hope for rebirth, basically. And this quest brings them face to face with another ghost from the old world, the Enclave.
The Enclave. The remnants of the pre-war government, with their own terrifying vision of purity, but based on eradication, not mutation.
That's them. Deeply insidious. Self-proclaimed true Americans, believing they were the last uncorrupted humans. They were seeking to cleanse the wasteland.
Cleanse it of whom? Mutants. Everyone not like them?
Pretty much everyone. Anyone mutated, anyone not from their pure bloodline, anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of human. Their plan involved a modified FEV virus to commit global genocide, wipe the slate clean.
Horrifying. So the Chosen One had to stop them.
Had to. And like their ancestor, they delivered a decisive no to that ultimate tyranny. And stopping the enclave had this huge impact. It directly shaped the tribes and towns in Northern California, laid the groundwork for the NCR, the new California Republic, trying to bring back democratic order.
Would the Chosen One leave any record of that defiance?
There's this great fragment, supposedly from a torn page of their journal. The enclave wanted purity. I'll give them purity of fire. I'll burn their lies to ash. Real righteous fury there.
You can feel it. And Long Ling Ting sees these two figures, the Vault Dweller and the Chosen One, as absolutely pivotal. Their choices weren't just personal. They shaped the whole future of the West Coast.
Yeah, Lóng Tíng Ting reflects on that, saying, their choices rippled forward, long past their time. The path they chose, the battles they fought, shaped the very air the next generations breathed.
Proof that one person can change everything.
It proves that one person can indeed shape the fate of millions, and the wastes, in their own silent way, will remember every single step. Their echoes persist.
Wow. Okay, so from shaping new societies out west, Long Ling Ting then takes us east, to a landscape really steeped in the ghosts of a dead empire, the capital wasteland. Washington, D.C. What was found there? What were the big discoveries?
The capital wasteland. Yeah, Lóng Tíng Ting calls it a graveyard of empires, which feels spot on. This is the setting for Fallout 3. In 2277, we follow the lone wanderer.
Escaping Vault 101 to find their dad. Another personal quest that gets much bigger.
Exactly. That search quickly gets tangled up with this huge, ambitious undertaking. Project Purity. The lone wanderer's personal journey becomes part of this larger struggle for the soul of the capital.
Project Purity. That was the big water purifier plan, right? Clean water for everyone.
Yeah.
A massive symbol of hope.
Absolutely. A really noble goal in a world literally choked by toxic water. The idea was to activate this massive pre-war purifier, turn the poisonous Potomac River into clean drinking water for countless settlements. A life-giving ambition.
Of course, nothing's ever that simple in the wasteland. Enter the Enclave again.
Right on cue, the Enclave returns. And true to form, they didn't just want to steal the purifier. Their plan was even more sinister. They wanted to weaponize it.
Weaponize water? How?
By adding a modified FEV strain to the purified water, specifically designed to kill off all mutated life, which, by that point, included most wastelanders securing the land for their pure vision of humanity. Control through contamination, turning life into death.
That's diabolical.
Yeah.
But the Enclave didn't win in D.C., did they? They met their match. And there was that iconic giant robot.
Liberty Prime. Yeah, the Enclave, despite all their tech and ruthlessness, ultimately failed in the capital wasteland. Lóng Ling Ting nails it, saying they were broken by their own arrogance. Their blind pursuit of purity led to their downfall. And Liberty Prime, well, the source just says Liberty Prime marched.
You can almost hear it. Communism is a temporary setback.
On the road to freedom.
Exactly. This colossal, walking, talking weapon became this powerful, almost absurd symbol of fighting tyranny, a giant jingoistic reminder of the old world's ideals lumbering into battle, both destructive and weirdly inspiring for some.
So, beyond the big robot fights and finding Dad, what were the deeper themes Lóng Ling Ting saw in the capital wasteland? What did it teach about power and survival there? DC really highlighted this clash between the ideal of purity-like, chemically pure water and the practical good it could actually do for desperate people. Right. It forced this choice. Chase an absolute, maybe unreachable ideal, or provide immediate, messy, tangible relief.
The perfect versus the good enough.
Exactly. And it underlined the constant, brutal struggle for basic resources. And maybe more disturbingly, how power corrupts, even power over something as basic as water. How easily a life-giving resource can be turned into a weapon of control or destruction.
There's that graffiti mentioned in the sources from the DC ruins.
Yeah, it chillingly sums it up. The last to die will die for nothing. A grim reminder of the war's ultimate futility, casting a shadow over any attempt to rebuild.
And Lóng Ting's personal experience there, it shaped their view on power and responsibility.
Definitely, they said. I walked where presidents once ruled and found only ruins, the hollow shells of grand promises. I helped bring clean water to the wasteland, not for power, not for glory, but simply because people, broken and struggling, deserve to drink without fear. They deserve that basic dignity.
A simple act of decency, meaning more than grand monuments.
Exactly. And in that, I felt a flicker of the world that could be. It's about those small acts.
And other voices reinforce that, right? Like Three Dog on the radio.
Yeah, Three Dog's voice crackling over the air, reminding the wasteland that someone still fought for the good. It emphasizes that even in despair, amidst ruins and tyranny, people were still championing justice and truth. Those voices, however faint, became beacons.
Okay, the journey keeps moving. Onward to the Mojave. Lon Lingting calls this place a chessboard of empires, which sounds less like survival, more like high-stakes politics. What choices were made there? Who are the players? Why is the Mojave such a crucial crossroads?
The Mojave Wasteland, yeah, setting for Fallout, New Vegas, 2281. It's absolutely a complex battleground, a real political and ideological pressure cooker. And at the center is the courier.
The one who gets shot in the head and survives. Talk about a rough start.
Incredible story, right? Survives that, gets pulled into this massive struggle for the region's future, caught between three major, very distinct powers, all fighting for control of Hoover Dam and the New Vegas Strip. It's a masterclass in factional conflict. Every choice the courier makes has these huge, immediate ripple effects.
And these factions, these chessboard players,
Yeah.
they represent totally different philosophies for the wasteland's future, right? Opposing visions.
Absolutely. First, you've got the New California Republic, the NCR. Long Ling Ting describes them as representing law and greed, which is a great oxymoron, really captures them.
Well, and greed. Trying to bring order, but maybe getting corrupted along the way.
Kind of. They're a republic that means well, but spreads too thin, too fast. They're trying to govern huge areas, stretching their army, their supply lines, often alienating locals who feel taxed or exploited. It's this grand vision of democracy, but constantly fighting logistical nightmares and the moral compromises of expansion in a broken world.
Okay, so that's the NCR. Who's the next major player?
The polar opposite, basically. Caesar's Legion, they represent chains. An order built on blood and broken backs. Fundamentally, a slaver's empire.
Brutal. Do we have anything from their perspective?
There's a captured field report from Cottonwood Cove. It's chillingly direct. The Mojave will kneel or burn. Their approach is just brutal conquest, forced cultural assimilation, rigid, almost ancient Roman discipline, absolute control through fear and violence.
So democracy struggling with itself versus brutal imposed order. Is there a third way?
There is Mr. House, the enigmatic pre-war billionaire. He offers a cold order, technocratic rule from behind the scenes, using his pre-war tech, his Securitron robot army.
So not democracy, not tyranny, but rule by machine logic.
Kind of. Detached, rational control. He thinks humanity needs a guiding hand, sees the other factions as messy, inefficient, doomed to repeat the mistakes that caused the Great War. His plan is calculated, long-term survival, often at the cost of individual freedom.
So the courier is stuck between the NCR's flawed democracy, the Legion's tyranny, and House's cold logic.
And potentially forging an independent path, too. It leads to this ultimate choice: freedom, dictatorship, or self-rule. One of the most morally complex choices in the whole series. No easy, good answer.
So the big theme here isn't just choice, but the weight of that choice. Individual agency meaning everything.
Totally. The source says, the courier's legend is one of choice. That is all we have in the wastes. It really hammers home that even one person's decisions, someone who starts as just a messenger, can shape the fate of entire civilizations.
And there's that note found with the courier.
Right, supposedly scrawled on a crumpled note in the Lucky 38, I don't care if they remember my name. I care that they can choose their own. That's enough. It's all about self-determination, people controlling their own futures, not being pawns.
And Long Lingting's own stance. It lines up with that freedom focus.
Perfectly, they state, I chose the path of the free, not the path of the tyrant nor the path of the technocrat. The Mojave, in its sun-baked desolation, belonged to its people. The Mojave taught me that freedom is not given, it is claimed, fought for, and defended with every fiber of your being. It is the most precious thing left in the wastes.
Claimed, not given.
Right.
Powerful. Okay, next stop on this journey, the Commonwealth, Boston's ruins, where the big question becomes, what even is human anymore? This feels like a newer, even more complex conflict. What did Long Lingting find there?
Fallout 4, the Commonwealth, 2287. Yeah, this is arguably one of the most morally gray, philosophically tricky landscapes in the whole series. The story kicks off with the sole survivor emerging from Vault 111, which, as we learn, was its own kind of hell.
The cryo-sleep vault, right, with the betrayal.
Exactly. There are internal vault reports, even a holotape fragment the survivor finds confirming it.
Yep.
Something like, they lied about everything. If anyone hears us, a horrific awakening.
And they come out searching for their kidnapped son.
Right. A deeply personal quest initially. But they find a world at war with itself. Synths seeking freedom, humans seeking safety, empires seeking control. That personal search immediately blows up into this huge struggle for the Commonwealth's soul.
And the core of that struggle is synths, artificial humans,
Mhm.
and how different factions see them. It's about defining life rights.
Precisely. It's a clash of ideologies blurring the lines between human and machine. You've got the Brotherhood of Steel, who saw machines as threats.
Same old brotherhood, basically. Technology is dangerous.
Pretty much. Soldiers in power armor sworn to keep tech from destroying the world again.
Yeah.
And they see synths, these advanced androids, as dangerous abominations, need to be wiped out to safeguard humanity, a threat to purity and control in their view.
Okay, so the Brotherhood wants them gone, and there's the Institute, the ones who make the synths.
Right, the secretive underground scientists. They saw them as tools, nothing more. Lóng Tíng describes them chillingly. Brilliant, blind, builders of a cage of their own making.
Brilliant, but blind. It's good. So scientific detachment over morality.
Totally. Prioritizing tech advancement and control. Treating surface dwellers like test subjects, cold, calculated.
Threats or tools. Are there any factions fighting for the synths?
Yes. The Railroad. A clandestine group arguing passionately that synths are people, with rights, with souls. They're the whispers in the dark, freedom's hidden hand. Dedicated to liberating synths, helping them escape the Institute, operating with total moral conviction, even if their methods are shadowy.
And then there are the Minutemen. Where do they fit in?
The Minutemen are different, described as ordinary people trying to protect what little they have. They represent the wasteland's true hope. A decentralized militia focused on community defense, helping settlements survive, often caught between the bigger fights, but always striving for local safety, cooperation.
So the ultimate moral question tearing the Commonwealth apart is, synths, are they just parts and code, sophisticated machines? Or do they have souls? Sentience, the right to freedom.
That's the heart of it. Are they people or property? And that question forces everyone, including the player, the sole survivor, to make incredibly difficult choices.
So given those complex, heartbreaking options, where did Lóng Tíng stand?
Their choice was clear. I chose to see synths as people, not machines. I had walked among them, seen their fear, their hope, their dreams. I stood with the Railroad.
So siding with the oppressed, the ones fighting for recognition.
Exactly. Synths are more than parts and code. They are souls, as real, as fragile, and as deserving of freedom as any born in flesh. I chose to build a commonwealth where the walls kept out fear, not change, a place where even the most unexpected forms of life could find a home.
That's a powerful statement about empathy, about expanding the definition of us.
It really is a progressive view, challenging old prejudices, and you see the flip side. The quiet determination of ordinary people in that Minuteman journal entry mentioned, I stood my post, that's all I could do, I hope it meant something. It highlights those small acts of resilience, people just trying to build a safer future, settlement by settlement. That's often the real bedrock of hope.
Okay, this overview Lóng Tíng provides. It gives us incredible insight into these masks of power shaping the wasteland. We've touched on them in context, but let's really dive deeper. What defines these major factions? Their core ideals, their flaws, their contradictions?
Yeah, this is where Lóng Tíng's long perspective really pays off. They offer this unvarnished look. Let's start with the Brotherhood of Steel again. We know them. Soldiers in power armor, sworn to keep technology from destroying the world again.
The tech hoarders, guardians, but also jailers.
That's exactly how Lóng Tíng puts it. Keepers of tech, guardians and jailers. Their mission, according to a recovered internal memo from Lost Hills, comes straight from the trauma of the Great War. It says, technology is the seed of our destruction and our salvation. Every scrap of pre-war knowledge is a weapon. Our mission remains unchanged. Gather, preserve, control. If outsiders see us as zealots, so be it. The wastes are not ready for what lies beneath their feet.
So, noble goal, prevent tech apocalypse, but the method is hoarding, control, limiting freedom and progress for everyone else. That's the contradiction.
Precisely. And then you have the Enclave. Truly sinister. Almost ghosts.
Ghosts of the old government, clinging to power, blind to their crimes. That was the description, right?
Yeah. Convinced they have this divine right to rule a world they helped break. Their ideology, purity at any price. An intercepted strategic brief lays it bare. Operation Genesis is to proceed. The wasteland's impurities must be cleansed. Non-compliant elements are to be neutralized. Let the mutants choke on their filth. America will rise again.
Pure hubris, believing they're the only true inheritors, everyone else is just. An impurity to be wiped out. Not even evil, in their own minds, just duty.
A totally perverted sense of duty, genocidal methods, but they see it as righteous restoration.
Chilling. Okay, moving on. The NCR, often seen as the good guys, relatively speaking, the closest to a functioning democracy. But Lóng Tíng pointed out flaws there too.
Big time. Described as a republic that means well but spreads too thin too fast. Their ambition to rebuild this huge democratic state with laws and order, it often comes at the cost of forgetting its own people.
Bureaucracy, inefficiency, corruption creeping in.
All of it. Stretching resources, influence beyond sustainable limits, struggling to provide basic services or protection to the vast areas they claim. Admirable ideals, but the practical execution often falls short. Leads to resentment from the very people they're supposed to protect.
And the total opposite of the NCR. Caesar's Legion.
Bluntly put, a slaver's empire built on blood and broken backs. They bring order, yes, a brutal kind of efficiency. But it's order carved from flesh, the cost, too high.
We heard that field report quote earlier. The Mojave will kneel or burn.
Exactly. Conquest-driven, absolute control through fear, violence, fanatical adherence to Caesar's doctrines, crushing individuality, freedom, all for perverse, maybe temporary stability.
But it wasn't just these big empires clashing, right? There were smaller groups embodying different kinds of hope or resistance.
Definitely. Like the Minutemen. Simply ordinary people trying to protect what little they have. They are the wasteland's true hope. Grassroots defense, local autonomy, self-reliance. They pop up when bigger powers fail, offering protection, aid, often with simple means.
And the railroad, fighting a very specific battle.
A light in the dark, fighting for those who have no voice. The whispers in the dark, freedom's hidden hand. Dedicated to that deeply moral cause, liberating sentient synths. A covert network, risking everything for a cause many don't even see as valid. Shows how the moral landscape itself is evolving.
And finally, lurking beneath it all, the Institute.
Brilliant, blind. Builders of a cage of their own making, they represent control behind the curtain. Shadowy, super advanced scientists focused on tech, on synths, often at huge human cost.
Their brilliance is undeniable, but so is their ethical blindness.
Profoundly so. They see themselves as saviors through science, but their methods are amoral, cold, detached from surface suffering. They've built this prison for themselves, physically underground, but also morally.
Okay, shifting focus slightly. Lóng Tíng also spends time reflecting on the vaults, these supposed sanctuaries, meant to save humanity, but the reality, often much darker. Experiments, betrayals.
Oh, absolutely. Lóng Tíng cuts right through the Vault Tech PR. The vaults were supposed to save us, their experiments wrapped in lies. Vault Tech presented them as these pristine shelters, humanity's last hope. But the primary purpose, often unethical, long-term experiments, social, psychological, biological, on unwitting people, treating lives like variables in some vast, sick study.
That deception is one of the most chilling parts of the whole lore. Casts a long shadow.
It really does. Undermines any idea of pre-war benevolence.
And we have specific, horrifying examples of these betrayals from the sources, right?
Yeah, plenty. Take Vault 13, where the first game started. It opened because the water chip failure forced their hand. The Vault Dwellers succeeded in stopping the Master, but that led to internal instability. And what was the Vault's response? Subject exiled for dangerous ideas.
So it wasn't just a shelter. It was designed to study isolation and forced reintegration.
Seems like it. The inhabitants were variables. Their expulsion wasn't an accident. It was part of the plan, or at least an acceptable outcome. It was never just about preservation.
And Vault 111, where the sole survivor came from. That was cryogenics, right?
A deeply chilling one. The internal report is blunt. Cryogenics stable. Subjects remain unaware of true purpose of the experiment. Management expresses confidence in data viability. Termination protocols pending. It wasn't a shelter. It was a freezer for human subjects. Maintained for observation over centuries, with termination protocols just waiting.
So the residents were never meant to leave. The sole survivor escaping was an anomaly.
Exactly. A perfect, horrifying example of Vault Tech's callousness, sacrificing people for abstract data.
Even Vault 76, the reclamation vault. It wasn't a straightforward promise either.
No. The Overseer's log sounds hopeful on the surface. Reclamation day has come. I send these good people into a world I fear may devour them. But hope is stronger than fear. May they build something better. But it still sends them out into a still deadly world without fully preparing them, without full disclosure of the specific horrors like the scorched plague that awaited.
So less of a cruel experiment, more like a benign neglect wrapped in optimism, a promise they couldn't really back up.
That feels about right. A promise of rebuilding, but profoundly under-resourced and unprepared for the monstrous challenges. They were still very much on their own.
And Lóng Tíng, walking through these places centuries later, feels the weight of those broken promises.
Deeply, they say. I have walked their hollowed halls, felt the chill of their abandoned secrets. I have heard the echoes of those who trusted Vault Tech with their lives and paid not with safety, but in blood, in madness, in profound, agonizing disillusionment.
Calling them tombs, not monuments to salvation.
The vaults are not monuments to salvation, but tombs of humanity's last, desperate, and often misguided hopes.
Yeah, powerful stuff.
So after this whole epic journey through the history, the factions, the choices, the vaults, what's the takeaway? Beyond the battles and the lore, what does the wasteland actually teach us about ourselves, about humanity? Lóng Tíng's journey really distills it down, doesn't it, into these core, universal, sometimes uncomfortable truths. First, there's the price of survival. It's not just about staying alive. It's the constant grinding struggle, the huge sacrifices demanded, the impossible moral choices you have to make just to see another sunrise.
Characters like the Lone Wanderer, the Vault Dweller, they face ethical nightmares, not just monsters.
Exactly. Every day is a fight against the environment, mutants, often other desperate people. It forces you to confront your deepest values. What are you willing to do to survive? What lines won't you cross?
And tied to that is the meaning of freedom. It's not some abstract ideal here.
Not at all. In the wasteland, freedom is emphatically not a given, but something hard-won and constantly defended, defined by individual choice, even in ruin. You have to claim it, fight for it, protect it from forces like the Enclave or the Legion.
The Vault Dweller, the Courier, their stories are all about that struggle for freedom, for agency.
Their choices, however hard, defined freedom for others. It shows liberty comes with huge responsibilities, painful sacrifices. What are you willing to give for it? That's the question the wasteland poses.
And we keep seeing these cycles of power and corruption mirroring the old world.
Over and over, the chronicles show how even good intentions can be twisted, how empires rise and fall, and the endless cycle of trying to impose order. Whether it's the Brotherhood's dogma, the NCR's bureaucratic expansion, Caesar's brutality. The quest for power almost always seems to corrupt, to trample liberty.
A grim reflection of our own history, maybe. Proving an apocalypse doesn't magically erase humanity's darker side.
Sadly, no. But then, despite all that destruction, all the renewed conflict, there's the monumental task of rebuilding from ashes, and it's not quick.
No, Lóng Tíng says, the bombs destroyed the world in moments. Rebuilding takes lifetimes.
Exactly. It's this generational undertaking, not just surviving, but actively building something new, reclaiming land, fostering communities, building trust where only cynicism existed before. It's this testament to stubborn hope against just overwhelming odds, a slow, grueling process, measured in centuries, not years. The real victory isn't just surviving, it's creating something better.
And somehow, amidst all the darkness, the struggle, the moral gray, Lóng Tíng keeps finding light in ruin, those sparks of humanity that just refuse to go out.
Yeah. Despite everything, the desolation, the threats, the compromises, sparks of hope, acts of kindness, and stubborn determination persist. It's that resilience, the human spirit refusing to be extinguished.
The Minutemen helping a settlement, the railroad risking everything, just one person sharing clean water.
Those small, often anonymous acts of good become these beacons in the darkness. They prove that compassion, decency, they can survive even the worst imaginable trials. Humanity's capacity for good endures.
And Lóng Tíng sums it all up with this really powerful central metaphor.
Yeah, they asked, what is the wasteland, if not a mirror? It shows us who we are when all else is stripped away.
A mirror reflecting everything. The cruelty, the greed.
But also our stubborn will to survive, our desperate need for connection, and our enduring, fragile capacity for hope. It shows us not just what we lost, but what we truly are.
Wow. Okay. That was an incredible deep dive. Guided by such a unique personal perspective, Lóng Tíng's journey, you really feel every step, don't you? It's not just lore. It's this profound exploration of being human when everything falls apart.
It absolutely is. And if you connect it to the bigger picture, The whole narrative of fallout, seen through this lens, it's this powerful testament to human resilience, but also, maybe more importantly, a stark reminder of the choices that define us. Not just the big, epic ones, but the everyday choices. Compassion, truth, how we treat each other.
Yeah, those small choices ripple out.
Exactly. It's about how that light can flicker, nearly go out sometimes, but ultimately it refuses to die. It really encourages you, I think, to look at our own world, our own choices, and ask, you know, what kind of legacy are we building? Knowing every action matters.
And Lóng Tíng leaves us with one final, really moving meditation. On their long journey, what they tried to leave behind in that vast, unforgiving, but weirdly beautiful wasteland. It's about the power of just trying.
Yeah, let's hear that final thought.
Fallout is not a story of bombs. It's a story of what we do after, of how we fail spectacularly and tragically, and then how we stand up again, sometimes broken, sometimes weary, but always trying again.
Trying again, that feels key.
Of how light, however faint, however threatened, can flicker but not die. I am Lóng Tíng. I have walked these ashes, seen the ruins of what was, and the fragile sprouts of what could be.
A sense of immense time, immense experience.
I tried to leave the wasteland better than I found it, to protect, not rule, to heal, not harm, to build, not just survive. And that is what, in the end, truly matters.
The intention, the effort.
The wastes are not silent. They hum with the radiation. They crackle with forgotten electricity. They whisper with the echoes of a million lost souls. The wind tells of the bombs carrying the dust of centuries. The rivers carry memory, stained with blood and sorrow. The highways remember feet, wheels, blood, the unending march of life and death.
The land itself remembers.
I do not know if the wasteland will ever truly be whole again, if the scars will ever fade. But I know this.
All right.
I tried, and in trying, there is always hope.